Well, all right. I hope you are ready to go because I'm excited about today's session as we begin overcoming the fear factor. My name is Mark DeJesus, and welcome to this first session. I'm excited, and I hope you are ready to rock and roll as we discover not only what kind of fears are addressing your life, but also how to overcome them. And if you don't know a lot about me, I am a very process-oriented teacher. I'm very methodical, and so I like to step by step, process by process, and it's something referred to in the Bible as precept upon precept. I like to build, and so each session will build on the previous so that you can gain the maximum insights that you can. And a lot of people would love it if God just poof, just made all our fears go away. But see, most of the time, actually a majority of the time, it really doesn't work that way. You see, a lot of the times, many of the fears that we're facing and struggles that we're going through, we often have to walk it out. We have to go through a process where we have to learn how to address the fears, learn how to make the adjustments, because fear is not just something that God can just take away from you, because it has programmed us. It has caused our lens to be skewed. It's caused us to focus on things in a way that God's not called us to. And so there's going to be a couple different pathways that I'm going to help you on, because the end result is many of the fears that you deal with, I'm going to lead you to a place where you can face them, really face these fears and overcome them. Then there's going to be some areas where you're going to learn to rest in the peace, love, and joy that God has for you. Many of you need a different tuning as to who God is, because your perspective of God has not allowed you to have the maximum freedom, capacity that He's called you to, because your relationship with God and how you see Him is a big determining factor in how you're going to be able to overcome fear, because He's the source of not being afraid. He's the source of resting in. He's the source of being able to find our comfort. So I'm here to address every facet of fear in your life. Maybe you're on medication and you're struggling with anxiety. Maybe you're getting therapy and you're struggling with anxiousness, panic, or just insecurities or whatever. Nothing wrong with getting therapy, all those things. In fact, I applaud you, those of you who are going to get help. And I applaud you for getting this resource, because that shows that you're vulnerable and you're wanting to get truth and you're wanting to get help for the issues of your life. So congratulations. And then everybody in between, because there's not a person on this planet that doesn't have some kind of fear issue. You know, there was somebody that I was coaching for about 6 months, and they sent me a message. And one of the questions was, will I ever be able to live without anxiety? And I said, you will be able to live where anxiety doesn't own you. You will be able to live where you're not clogged up with that in your space. But at each stage of life, there's new things that we face because God is always stretching us. I mean, it's been about 12 years since God came and addressed my fear, anxiety, depression issues and began to give me a roadmap. And it took me a couple years to really walk out the principles that I teach today. Now, what I experienced was really debilitating levels. I could barely function on a lot of days. I was so maxed out with anxiousness. And so I'm here today to tell you there's hope for a better life. There's hope for peace. I live a very high-end faith life. I take a lot of risks that a lot of people would crumble in fear over. Business decisions or just overall ministry faith steps that I take. It would make a lot of people really just, shrivel up. But because I face my fears at a personal level, it helped me to really overcome at a higher level in decisions I make, choices I make. And that's the invitation I want to bring to you, is that I not only want to help you get rid of these fears, but open up the potential that fear is blocking you from. What kind of gifts and beautiful opportunities and great steps can you take that fear is trying to keep you from. That's what I want to begin to tap into. That's what I want to get you focused on. Because if you establish the why am I wanting to overcome these fears? Then you're really going to gain leverage in those moments where you're struggling or you're discouraged and you just don't quit because you're in it to win it. This session is going to be one to help you gain some discernment. I want to use this session as a time to allow you to kind of do some inventory, to kind of honestly assess yourself. Because if you're not honest moving forward, it's not going to be any good. You're going to rush through it. You're going to be sloppy about this process, and you're not going to take in the full value. As I go through these 6 sessions, I do want to let you know this resource is available to you for as long as you need it. So it's always going to be here. You can replay sessions. You can come back. And I want you to know that you can always send me questions. mark@markdejesus.com. Send me the question, and I will post a video reply to that question on this page. That way, you and everybody else can take advantage of the questions. I've done this in past courses, and it's just a great feature because it helps me to have an ongoing work with the people that I'm working with, and it allows me to use my gifts at the maximum capacity, which is speaking, communicating, and I can do it in one-on-one sessions, or I can do it in things like this where I can benefit as much people as possible. So I want to get to an opening question today because I want to get the denial out of your life. I want to get as much denial and avoidance out. I want you to face come against these things and begin to start recognizing the fears that drive your life. I know I mentioned some of these words that I'm going to get into before, but I'm going to kind of define them so we can start recognizing when with our words and our thoughts what we're really talking about when we're addressing fear issues in our life. So the question that I have for you is, do you have fear? I think I spend a lot of my time helping people to realize that underneath our fabrications, underneath our coping mechanisms and the way that we do life, we have a lot of fears that we actually serve. I mean, we spend the majority of our days avoiding pain, avoiding challenging issues, avoiding awkward situations, avoiding scenarios that we don't think we can handle, avoiding risky things, there's a lot of things that we run from and we avoid because that's the nature of what fear does. So just because your body is not riddled with panic and anxiety right now doesn't mean you don't have fear issues in your life. I meet a lot of very calm people that are riddled with fear, chock full of fear, because they have conditioned their whole life to live in the safest place possible of survival. Now, they're miserable. They're not fulfilled. They're not living to their potential, but they feel like they've deceived themselves that they're good and they don't have any issues to deal with. So I really want to help pull up the roots here. I really want to shake the bushes and help you to get honest with yourself. That's my investment to you. It would be a waste of the money you spent on this course if I did not sit here and spend a session going, all right, let's do some inventory. Let's get honest with your life. I want you to look at your marriage. I want you to look at if you're single, your dating life. I want you to look at your family background, your work life, your business life, your friendships, your parenting, your relationship with your parents, your interactions at church, your interactions in the community, your political interactions, your view of the world. Because I run into so many people who will say, I don't have fear. I'm just concerned. Mark, I don't have any fear issues at all. I'm good. That's the classic line. It's a classic line people like to say, I'm good. Or sometimes people say this to me, say, this is a good fear, Mark. This is a good fear. This is a classic bondage that locks people in. Because they go, no, Mark, this fear that I'm dealing with, this one's a good fear. So you don't have to deal with it. So I'm going to put a nice bow on it, put this nice fear in the corner because this one's okay. And the enemy would love you to do that because then it just gives him more room and more leverage to assault you with further fears in your life. So we got to get honest. Some people, you've come to the conclusion of, I'm nervous and anxious person. It's who I am. You've come into agreement with fear being a part of your identity, fear being a part of who you are. Maybe you say, you know what, I'm a worrywart, and I just worry. Now, I want to really clearly nail this home before I move forward. Anyone who says they are not facing some kind of fear or have some kind of fear issue in their life that they need to deal with, they are one of two things, if not both. One is they are probably living in denial. That's a big one. They're living in a place of denial. Number two is they're not growing. Because if we're always looking for the safe route, we'll always take the place of sitting on your biscuit, never having to risk it. Okay? And that's not where God is. And that's why a lot of people are frustrated today, because they're not taking the level of risk that faith requires to really depend upon God to meet you and to empower you to live a supernatural life. We're waiting for God to supernaturally do something so then we can step in it. That's not faith. That is just, that's just natural. It's a blessing. It's great to have those things happen before we step out, but that's not the ultimate life you were called to. And in order for you to really kick your marriage up to the next level, you're going to have to face your fears. 100% of my marriage work with couples is couples who have to deal with their fear issues with each other. They're afraid. There's a fear-based and shame-based stronghold in their life that doesn't allow them to really open up and show vulnerability because they're afraid of what the other person will say, do, or think about them. If every place in your life, you're going to have to face your fears to go to the next level of honesty in relationship. I'm shocked at how many people don't have honest relationships or don't want to, even people that I interact with. It's like, come on, can we just get real? And it's like, we're just shocked. I'm not being mean. I'm not advocating being rude. I'm advocating real honesty because I made a decision 12 years ago. I'm sick of being afraid. I'm sick of being anxious. I'm sick of panic attacks. I'm sick of mulling at night, losing my sleep. I'm sick of being nauseous in my stomach and losing my lunch. I'm sick of acid reflux. I'm sick of hiatal hernias. I'm sick of being overweight because of my stress load and then trying to eat it and nurture it with food. I'm sick of my relationship suffering. I'm sick of not being present. I'm sick of being just held into a neutral spot because I am, afraid. And the only way we're going to move forward is if your level of pain of what you realize this dysfunctional way of living is going to lead you starts to surpass your survival. Because see, here's what I do. Here's the level of what I do to live and to cope. If the pain of me staying in that doesn't rise up above it to go, I got to do something. I got to change. You know what was one of them for me? Because I had terrible fear and anxiety issues regarding intimacy, relational intimacy. I was commitment phobe. I couldn't keep a relationship with a female. And one day I recognized if I stay this way, I'm going to be single and alone at 80 years of age. And I made a decision that day that that's not what I want. You see, the pain of where I was headed awakened me. Something needs to change. And I find a lot of times people don't change until they hurt enough that they have to. You'll serve your fears. You'll serve them lock, stock, and barrel every time they fire until you come to the place where you have a gut check that says something's got to change in my life. So what I want to do is I want you to just really do some honest evaluation as I go through this session today. And I want to go back through some of these fear-based words. And I want to awaken you to the reality of what they mean. I want to awaken you to the reality of what these thoughts and what these issues are doing in your life. Okay? So this is really important stuff. You can get your notes out underneath this screen. You can click on it, and there should be a PDF that you can open up. Go ahead and print that off if you want to. Keep me playing, or if you're watching a recording of this, pause. So let's get into this, all right? Because I like to use this to help people understand where some of these words and what we have come into agreement with that actually needs to be broken in our life. Let's look at the word worry. A lot of people say, I'm a worrywart and I worry a lot. It's just who I am, and I'm just always mulling over it. I want you to know that God did not create you to be a worrier all the time. He did not create you to live in constant worry. Now, look at what this word means. The etymology of it is a Middle-aged English word meaning to strangle, to choke, to harass by tearing, biting, or snapping, especially at the throat, to feel uneasy about something, to be troubled. It describes how we mull over issues continually. And it's interesting because people that I pray with over worry and fear issues, they talk about having like this clamping on their throat. There's a tightening there. And I want you to know that your enemy, the spirit of fear, knows how to get a hold of your throat. Because you know what worry does? It stops your voice from being able to speak confidently. It focuses your attention on things that don't matter, or focuses on things that you don't need to be thinking about. And I'm going to share with you in a few minutes, a little bit later, that one of the reasons that the enemy so easily trains us to worry is we're always looking ahead. We're always looking ahead. And actually what we need to do is look in front of us and just be present in the day. Be present to what's in front of us. But worry doesn't let us do that. Are you a worrier? Have you been programmed to do worry in your life, and you want to highlight that one and go, you know what, God, I need to bring this before you? Second one is anxiety. This is a troubling of the mind for an uncertain event, from a Latin word meaning to choke, to cause distress, tightness, and narrowness. One may not even know the object of their anxiety. This is the key that separates anxiety from a lot of the others, because fear often has a specific focus. Like you can have a fear of a certain area, or you can have a phobic specific fear that is easily identified. One of the biggest fears out there is public speaking. It's the number one fear in society. People are afraid of public speaking more than they're afraid of death. And there's an old Jerry Seinfeld joke that he says that means that people would rather be in the casket than giving a eulogy at a funeral. And it's funny, but it's true, is we are more afraid of talking in front of people than we actually are of dying. And so there's those specific kinds of fears, but anxiety is just a general feeling of fear that is a struggle to narrow it down as to what exactly am I anxious over. Now, sometimes usually what happens with anxiety is it starts off with a specific thing, but then it moves to other things. Next thing you know, you're just anxious and you don't know why. Are you catching this? Those of you listening, watching, I know I'm nailing your battleground, because that's how anxiety starts off. It starts off specific, like you're anxious about your bills, and then you're just so you're anxious about them. So the anxiety makes its way into your life, and then what it does is it begins to move into other areas. So then you feel, and that's why they call it GAD, Generalized Anxiety Disorder, because that disorder is a generalized feeling of anxiousness, where you don't feel safe, you don't feel at peace. Our whole world is currently structured around this whole thing called stress. And there's a billion-dollar industry over people just trying to find their peace and trying to find rest. And I'd actually love to give some insights on stress as we go through these sessions. I may even do like a bonus or some other things. I plan on helping give tools and so forth on dealing with stress, because it's so multifaceted. But look at what the meaning is here. To cause misery by pressing down on. Isn't that the case? Most people that are stressed, they're miserable. And people that could be making millions of dollars, they could be doing so well financially. But you know what? They're just miserable. They're not happy. They're not filled with joy. They don't have any contentment in their life, because really at the end of the day, they are stressed. And they're stressed because fear creates this sense of unease and pressure. There's a pressure. You've got to get this done, or else people will be upset. You got to hit these numbers, or else you will be seen as a failure. You've got to excel at this level, or else people are going to see. So it creates these swirls all the time. And this makes us miserable. So I decided in my life that instead of living towards things that create stress, that I would instead live a life that's balanced, that's grounded, that's set up for success in God's eyes, not in man's eyes, so that I live in health. Because look at what it says here. Merriam-Webster says a physical or chemical and emotional factor that causes bodily or mental tension and may be a factor in disease causation. I'm telling you this today, that the majority of the diseases that we're facing today are manifesting because of the breakdown in our body, because of fear's effects, the stress, how we feel about ourselves, the guilt in life, the self-hate, and how we don't like ourselves, we don't love ourselves. There's all these fear-based thoughts that our body was not made to live in. You were made to live in love. You're made to live in peace. And when you're not in that, your body does not respond very well. And so this stress factor has to be dealt with. And this was a major thing that God began to heal in my life, because the more that I got free from fear issues and I began to break agreement and start walking in new patterns, my body started getting more healthy. And many of you watching this, you're going to know it. Now, our next session, I'm going to talk about the physiology of fear, because I want you to understand how your body works so you can get a better grip on some of the factors that affect you in your life. Another word here is the word panic. A panic is an interesting defined meaning, a sudden, overwhelming fright, and there's a root in Greek mythology. And I don't have time to, to talk about Greek mythology here, but the Greek mythology, a lot of it is basically a demonic realm of describing a lot of, Satan's tactics. It's distracted mankind from realizing who God is, and we spent all our time gazing at these mythological creatures. But it actually, you get a look into what the enemy's assignment is over your life. The demon god Pan, used to describe terror and immobility that comes with certain triggers: immobility, sweat, dizziness, hot flashes, chills, and then a sense of loneliness. And that's very well describes panic, because you feel immobilized, you feel a shock come over your system, and then you feel isolated, you feel lonely, you feel separated from people. It's like you're in a crowd, but you're not there. This is a fear factor. This is the enemy's work over your life. Now, panic attacks can have a lot of different ways that they come about, but you have to understand its work is fear-based. Now, there's the word phobia. Now, phobia is an extreme or irrational fear or dislike of a specified thing or group. So phobias get into like specific things. So you can have social phobia, meaning you have issues in relating to people in social settings. You can have agoraphobia, which is a fear of large crowds. You can have arachnophobia, which is the fear of spiders. It could be a specific thing that becomes a programmed way. Now, I read some interesting research, and I was going to mention that in the next session, but there's really only two fears that you're born with, by the way. Two like basic fears that are embedded, that science believes, okay? Because one of the things I want you to understand is God did not create you to be anxious all your life. He did not program you to be locked up in that. And that's a major revelation right there. But the two fears you're born with is fear of loud noises and the fear of heights, or a fear of falling. And that was embedded in you probably in childhood, so that if you hear loud noises that maybe you'd properly avoid as a baby or a toddler, something dangerous, and then heights so that you wouldn't get yourself into a precarious place that would be dangerous, so that you'd understand to walk in a place where you're not going to fall off a cliff and so forth. But phobias are a work of fear in specific areas. Now, two words I'll go through a little bit more quickly, because we'll talk about them in other ways. But timidity is to fear, easily frightened, lacking in courage or self-confidence, lacking in boldness or determination. See, the solution to your fears is the love of God giving you the confidence that you need to rise up. A lot of people that I work with, when I was doing pastoral ministry, when I was doing church ministry, now I teach and write full-time and consult. People that I help, I break them out of their identity that they've given into. They've given into a lesser identity. And I'll take somebody who's this, like, they just believe that they're this, like, really shy and introverted person. Next thing you know, they're up front and they're giving messages, or they're giving exhortations of some kind. Just want to check a couple things in my connection here, make sure that we're working okay. So moving on to intimidation. Intimidation is becoming threatened and fearful of someone or something. It pushes you back. It keeps you from stepping forward. And this is really important to understand, because that's what fear wants to do, is block you from your gift, block you from your potential, block you from being able to be all that God's called you to be. And my job here is to raise you up to a new level so that you can fight and overcome. Dread, it's anticipate with great apprehension or fear. There's the word terror, extreme fear, the use of terror to intimidate people, especially for political reasons. Terrorism, a person or thing that causes extreme fear. The word fright, a sudden intense feeling of fear. There's the word scare. I'm scared. I'm scared of this. And sometimes it's just good to be honest, to just say, you know what, I'm scared. I'm scared. And that's okay to admit. That's okay to just be honest about. To just realize, you know what, I'm afraid and I need to deal with this. Don't beat yourself up. Don't beat yourself up because you have fear issues. God's not condemning you. He loves you. And he wants to empower you to rise up. I'm concerned. That word concern actually means worried, troubled, or anxious. It's a way we often cover over our fears. Or I'm overwhelmed. Look what that word overwhelmed means. Being buried or drowned beneath a huge mass. The word control. People who are very controlling, they're afraid. And so they cope with their fears by going into control. And the reason often control is they're in relationship with somebody who's very passive. Maybe you're a wife and your husband's very passive, so you take control. Maybe you're a boss at work and your employees don't step up the way you want to, so you take control. Rather than relationally working things out to work better, you control. And quite often, control has to come with manipulation, where you're now taking something to move it towards your aim. You're controlling or influencing a person or a situation. You might be cleverly, you're not doing it outright, but it's might be unfairly or unscrupulously, dishonestly, and really no one should be manipulated. But the overarching word of fear is really the unease of a person upon the thought of something painful, evil, or threatening. Okay, that's kind of what it's doing. But I want you to understand that this word fear has an umbrella over all those other words. So I'm going to leave these slides up and I'm just going to continue to the next session. And let's talk about some common areas that are influenced by fear. This session will be a little bit thicker, a little bit longer, because I want to just give some overviews, get you thinking, and let God do a work in your life. When we look at the subject of fear, we know in the news, fear is everywhere. Fear 100% drives the ratings on the news. I want to encourage you as a believer, as somebody who wants to get set free from fear, I want to encourage you to limit the amount of news that you're watching, because the news is meant to condition you into fear. It's there to condition you to be anxious. It's there to condition you to be worried. It's conditioning you to keep watching, because that's how it builds its ratings. You cannot build ratings on, hey, tune in at 6 because it was a great day today and not a whole lot happened, so tune in. No, there's some kind of crisis that they need to build. And if there isn't a crisis, they'll make one. And I'm telling you, that's what drives our politics right now, is that crisis things are made and fashioned in a way to tune you in. I'm not saying watching news is evil. I'm saying if you have struggles in the mind, you need to limit the amount of news intake so that you can be able to allow yourself to renew your mind. You may need to limit your social media interaction. You may need to limit the amount of social media that you're taking in because social media can often be very negative. Either that or filter your feed to have people posts that are very encouraging. I really try to, in my posts and in my social media interaction, is to either be encouraging, positive, or just real and straight up. And those two things are important. So I don't want to be just feeding the fear monsters that are out there. There's the avenues of terrorism. Why is terrorism such a threat? Terrorism is a threat not because let me say it this way. It's not so much the bad thing happening, it's the anticipation of it. And so terrorists get their power through their words and through what they say could happen. And so a terrorist organization could literally do nothing, and they're just threatening, and they're just shallow words. But the fact that it could happen creates terror in people. There are marketing strategies out there that use fear. There's an old marketing strategy called fear, uncertainty, and doubt strategy. And what it means is it creates a sense of fear regarding a problem that is presented to you, an uncertainty of what will happen if you don't buy their product, and create a doubt of going, my goodness, I need to purchase this product, or else what will my life be without it? In a lot of, in sales, people need to make their sales, and that's part of business. But there is fear aspects people use to drive up sales. There's our fear-filled entertainment of horror movies, of roller coasters, and people seem to love the adrenaline rush. And yet at the end of the day, we're wondering why we're so anxious. We're wondering why we're struggling. So we're going to alcohol and drugs, and we're numbing out to Netflix just to try to deal with our fears, or we're just busy all day long. But really, in reality, we're not settling down into the peace that God has. There's family fears. Many grew up in homes where their lives were filled and surrounded with fear because they didn't feel safe. Maybe your life was performance-based. So how you were loved was based on how well you did things and how well that you seemed to come across in your various performance activities. You weren't just loved for who you are. Our churches can be filled with fear. Churches can use their leadership to intimidate people, to make them serve or make them operate in a certain way out of fear. Way too many pastors and church leaders operate out of manipulation and control. It's really a recipe of witchcraft is what that is. It's not God's design for how he's meant us to shepherd each other and to help one another. Schools with bullying, are the peer pressure that's going on. Trauma is a big one. Because trauma is an event in life where something happens that's out of your control. And so because of that, your system is shocked. And this becomes a door point for fear to get in, because in a trauma, you can't really take your thoughts captive. In a trauma, you can't collect your thoughts. Everything happens faster than the rate of thought can even process it all. So it becomes like a blur, but then it re-triggers because the enemy can use that to re-trigger, and keep you locked in the torment that trauma brought. I also want you to understand that fear runs in generations. This is important. We'll talk about the spiritual aspects of fear, but fear runs in generations. So I want you to know many of the fears that you face in your life are actually fears that your family has probably had to face at certain levels of their own life. The problem is that most families are not really transparent and don't really talk about the issues. So they aren't able to sit down and go, hey, you know what? I've had that too. Let's pray together. Let's work together on this so we can grow. Because oftentimes your undealt with fears are often the ones that our children have to face in their own life, because certain traits and certain battlegrounds are passed from generation to generation until a generation rises up to break through. There's also the issue of how fear causes physical illness. In the second session, I'll talk to you about physiology. this long-term chronic fear-based thinking breaks down and wears down the body, down to the immune system, respiratory system, cardiovascular system. It's also the basis, and some of you may not understand this, but just buckle up, that this, what the Bible calls a spirit of fear, is the key root component behind all mental illness. The majority of mental illness is based on a spirit of fear, because anxiousness, a lack of safety, a lack of feeling secure, loved, sane, at peace, is the description of all mental illness, mental instability that we're seeing rise and rise and rise up more, from anxiety to panic attacks to depression, OCD, obsessive compulsive phobias, PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress. But also I want you to know that at the end of the day, fear comes in through agreement. You got to understand that fear comes in through simple agreement. You can have none of those factors in your life, but you just agree with it in thought, because the enemy gives you a thought, you listen to it. So here's some key fear assignments. And I want you to look over these. I want to give you a couple thoughts, and I'm going to begin to land this plane, because we're getting to session 2, where we're going to go over what the physiology happens. And then after that, we're going to go into tools and keys and understanding, breaking this down and starting getting some freedom. Here's kind of like 10 of them that I outlined that are common. There's to be some others we can add to here. The biggest one's fear of rejection. The fear of someone in relationship doing something to make us feel rejected and unloved to some degree, some way. Even God. The fear of God rejecting us. The fear of God not loving us. The fear of exposure is huge. We don't want to be seen naked. We don't want to be seen exposed. We don't want to feel that someone sees a flaw, because they have the ability, when that flaw happens, or they see that flaw, they have an opportunity to reject that flaw, which then we feel totally rejected in who we are in our identity. And the reason that fear of exposure is so thick is when I'm exposed and you see it, I don't have a plan B. I don't have something else where I can go, hey, here behind door number 2. No, you've seen me at a deep level. And if you don't like that, it is the most painful place in a human heart. We have the fear of failure, which causes people to procrastinate, causes people to not step out, because we're afraid of failing, when really failure is a part of life. Every person in the Bible screwed up, everybody. And if you're so afraid of failure, it empowers the enemy. When you're not afraid of failing, you step out and you learn, you grow. Now, number 4 is one I didn't realize that I had in my life, and it took some time for me to realize it, because I was so busy getting rid of my fear of failure and taking steps and stepping into bigger things, that as I experienced some success, I was like, whoa, wait a second. There's a whole pressure coming on me when I'm successful. And I realized that I need a level of security in God at the level that He's bringing me to. So that may not be something that's on your radar now, but it will be. Trust me, as you break through more and more. The fear of man is one when it comes to being concerned about what people think, being intimidated by their assessment. It's what Jeremiah had when God said, don't be afraid of their faces. Why did He say their faces? Because God knew Jeremiah would stand up to speak. He'd look into the people's eyes and he'd shriek back and wouldn't be bold in his declarations and his prophecies. The fear of abandonment will cause you to not allow yourself to get close to people, because you'll be afraid that they're going to leave you hanging. And the pain of loss will kick in, so you avoid even getting close to people. The fear of the future is worry and dread. That's basically all, is constantly thinking about tomorrow, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Fear of poverty will cause us to do one of 2 things, sometimes both. One is that it becomes self-fulfilled. We're afraid of growing broke, so we actually end up in poverty situations in our life because we keep serving it. Or I've helped people that are pretty wealthy, they have a good amount of money, but they have fear of poverty all the time, and they never stop. They can't stop because they never want to go back to a time in their life when they were broke. So they rev up the engine so hot They are successful in the world's eyes, but they're burnt out. Then there's the fear of evil. There's a lot of this today. One of my favorite passages of Scripture is found in Psalm 23, where David had such a revelation of the Lord's presence and God's ability to protect us and keep us in his covering. He said, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Today, some of you need to make a declaration that says, I'm not going to be afraid of evil anymore. I'm tired of being afraid of evil. I'm tired of giving evil room in my life, and I'm tired of cooperating with it. I'm sick of it. I want to be free. And part of that is really coming under the care and trust that the Lord is your shepherd. He covers you. He's with you. He'll never leave us or forsake us. He's walking with us, and he believes in you more than you believe in yourself. And you need to connect to his belief in you so that you can rise up to be what he sees. And that, my friends, is what will help you overcome the fears of your life. And really, the core thing that empowers fear is not feeling safe. Of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that I've personally been able to coach in my life and journey, the theme of not feeling safe is huge, or as New Yorkers would say, is huge. This is a big one, because if I don't feel safe, then fear has a place to have its work. So I want you to begin to understand when you have an impression of fear, when you have a feeling of fear, I want you to understand that the source of that is not just your own psychology and your own body. Yes, you're feeling the impressions of it. Yes, you're feeling all these things pulsate through your being. But what I want you to clearly understand is there is an attack coming against you to keep you locked into fear. It's one of Satan's number one assignments. And how does he do it? Through thought. He gives you thoughts, feelings, impressions. So God came to Adam because Adam got pummeled with the enemy's thoughts. As soon as he took of that fruit, it gave the enemy the ability to speak into his thoughts and minds. You see, I don't have a lot of time to cover this right now, but before Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, did you notice that Satan didn't have the ability to speak to their thoughts? He had to channel a serpent to talk to them because he had no ability to put a thought in their minds. Once they ate of the fruit, he no longer needed to use that as a pathway to speak to Adam and Eve, because his evil kingdom could now speak through their thoughts. And so immediately what happens to Adam and Eve? They are naked. And now being naked is seen as shameful and fearful. So shame and fear kick right up right at the jump. And Adam and Eve are afraid. And so God comes to him and says, what's the deal, Adam? And Adam goes, I was afraid. You hear him basically saying, I am fear. I want you to be aware of the fact of where you make yourself one with fear, where you say, I am afraid. Be careful where you make yourself one with fear, because you are not fear. You may have fear working in you, but you are not fear. That's why God's response to him was, who told you you were naked? Who spoke to you about your nakedness? Now, was God saying, who knocked on your door and said, hello, Adam and Eve, hey, nakedness is being a problem? No, God's saying, who told you in your thoughts? And that's what I want you to expose today, as I want to expose the enemy in your thoughts. Who told you to be afraid? Now, I want you to listen to that question right now. Who told you to be anxious? Who told you to be afraid? Sometimes that question brings us back to a moment in our history. We're growing up, an experience with our parents taught us to be afraid, to live in fear. Maybe, you were neglected and abandoned, and so that told you, be afraid, you're on your own, no one's here. No one's here to protect you. Because, see, recognition of this is going to start giving you power to put this fear on alert that you're no longer going to tolerate it. The whole point of this session is twofold. One, for you to start admitting the fact that you have fears influencing your life. And number two, start recognizing these things in your life so you stop serving them and you start recognizing, hey, okay, I need to allow God to change these patterns so that I can move into a new way of thinking. I made a decision in my life. It's the name of the book. I will not fear. I will never make a lifestyle decision based on fear. But that's just my life. That's just my compass. Now, do I have anxiousness or do I have moments where I get stressed? Sure, that's a part of growing. It's a part of life. But fear will not own my decisions and will not own my overall peace. And I live in a dimension of sanity that I have never had in my life. A level of true Holy Ghost, God-filled sanity. And I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful that I can sit and enjoy my kids. I'm thankful that I can sit, have a conversation with my wife and be present with her. I'm thankful that I can, next week my family's going on vacation. I'm thankful that I can sit down and just be with them and not be thinking about a million different things. Now, I don't do that perfectly all the time, and that's okay because I'm growing and God's continually stretching me. But the question I want to ask you today is, what fear do you need to face? Don't just look at the list and go, I got them all, I'm a hopeless mess. That's not productive. What fear in your life do you need to be honest with? Don't write down any more than 3. I mean, you could put down anxiety, that's fine, but that's generalized. Is there something specific that you're recognizing that anxiety comes from? Let's start creating a blueprint for your freedom. Let's start creating a blueprint for what you need to address now, because the other thing I want you to do is, okay, you address that fear, you wrote it down. What's on the other side of it? So if you're afraid of, you're afraid of your finances, what's on the other side of it? Is daily living in a trust that God is going to provide for you. Isn't that an amazing place to live? Maybe you're afraid of public speaking. What's on the other side? You speaking confidently to people and touching people's lives. What's on the other side of you breaking free of anxiety? Helping others, being at peace, being able to go for walks and enjoy them, look at God's creation and enjoy it. Get a picture of this in your life so that you can begin to face this with a new tenacity and a new power in your life. I look forward to working with you on the next session. God bless you.